Hi there. Welcome back to Second Take, where we talk about reclaiming your health, taking back your power, and rewriting your story. So, I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about kind of how I personally got into a situation where my health had taken such a turn for the worse that I really needed to change my thought process around health. So, obviously, as a single mom for a long time, I lived for my kids. I wasn't too concerned about my own health. I was more concerned about making sure everything was good with them, make sure they got to where they needed to be. Their schooling was good, make sure they were achieving the milestones they needed to achieve, making sure that their health was good and all was well with the kids. And then obviously work and house, taking care of the house, taking care of my own job, all of those things took precedence. And the me part of things, taking care of my own health, wasn't even really a thought. It wasn't anything that I had time for. So early on, and I'm sure many of you who are parents, or even if you're not parents, maybe you're just very involved in your schooling or in your job, whatever. Things take precedence when you're young and you don't have many of those issues that tend to creep up as we age. So for me, I was very much in that boat. Wasn't worried about my health, didn't really think about it. Even when things started to go wrong, I started having a lot of problems after both my kids were born with headaches. I had massive migraines, and this was back in the day, long before we had anything that had to do with Imatrix or anything like that. And there really weren't any options other than going to the hospital, and would give you a shot of Demerol, which then makes you incapacitated and you really can't do much. So I was struggling with these headaches, had some of those issues cropping up, and then I had these overwhelming joint pains that came out of nowhere. And I started this series talking a little bit about how I was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, and that was around about that time. I was in my early 20s when that diagnosis hit. They also knew at that point that I was hypothyroid. So after the birth of both my children, I ended up being hypothyroid. Um, so these kinds of issues were starting to crop up even early on when I was young, but I still didn't think about it much because I didn't have time to think about it. So I dealt with it. I knew that occasionally I was going to have these flare-ups that would cause excruciating pain, and I would get through it. You do what you got to do. So it wasn't really anything I really thought about. Um, but shortly after I told you all about the incident with Nick when he was young, and I was working at the medical malpractice insurance company as a receptionist at that point. I was quickly moved into more of an adjusting role, and I was the right hand to the regional manager, and that started about 6 months after I had started working there. They started moving me up. They saw that I had promise, and they thought that they would train me to become an adjuster. Great. So I started working my way up, and around about that time, I had also changed my major when I started at the insurance company because I recognized, as a single parent with two kids working at the hospital, going through with the remainder of my schooling and becoming a nurse, I would have to work in the hospitals, and have not so desired shifts in order to put in my time as a baby nurse. So I thought, well, a business degree will be more conducive to being a single parent. I'll be able to have the weekends off. I can be out of work when they're out of school. So that'll be more conducive to being a single parent. So that's what I did. So I started working my way up. And I was with the medical malpractice insurance company for about 4 years or so, and then had graduated with my business degree. And unfortunately, I was kind of capped there. I really couldn't go any further. Um, and I just needed more money. I had these two young kids to take care of, and I needed more money. The income cap wasn't really going to be a good thing in the long run. So I ended up moving over to an auto insurance company, one of the large insurers. And after being there for a little over a year, they had a huge program there where they tried to ensure that all of their supervisors met a certain basic minimum standard. And in order to figure that out, they made everybody test for their jobs. So here I'm working in this office environment, and we had at the time, I think maybe five supervisors, five or six supervisors on the team. And those supervisors had to take a test to see if they could keep their jobs. And at the same time, those of us who were coming up in the organization, they said, well, if you want a future as a supervisor, you should take the same tests so that you can see what it is that you need to work on in the future. Well, I kind of knew that was my career path eventually. So I took the test. And lo and behold, I passed the test, which wasn't expected by me or anyone else. And after passing the test, it also became clear that four of the six supervisors in the office had failed the test. So they got two shots to take it. These four supervisors failed it both times. So they were demoted. And it was myself and one other woman who had passed the test, who were not currently supervisors. And they asked us both if we wanted to become supervisors. And I remember it was so bizarre. At the time, I'm in my late 20s. I didn't know shit from Shinola, and I knew it. And I thought, you're going to promote me? Like, are you crazy? And I just, there's no way I can't do that job. But then at the same time, I was like, well, crap, it's a much bigger paycheck. I can learn how to do the job. So I took it. And I remember then thinking, okay, what are you going to do about it? You're in a job you have no idea how to do. So I started learning everything and anything I could about management. I poured myself into learning way more than I ever thought to learn in my actual business classes, because though I had a business management degree, I didn't know shit. So I just read voraciously all of these books about leadership and about creating teams and gaining trust. And I literally poured my heart and soul into learning everything I could about managing people and leading people. And it ended up being not only what I loved doing, but also something that I was really good at. I not only enjoyed it, but I took great pleasure in being able to turn around people's performance. If there was somebody who was not a very strong performer, they would put them on my team, and I would be able to build that person, build their not only their technical capabilities, but also build their self-awareness and their skills to allow them to become more and more efficient as adjusters and also to enjoy their job more. So it really became a win-win for myself and the people that I was working with. And I found that I loved it. I loved leading people. It was just a great fit for my skills personally, and more importantly, something that I really enjoyed. And I never forgot Mr. Dixon and what he did for me. So I always tried to treat those that worked with me, not only treat them well, but also give them the things that I could to help them live better lives overall, because it's not just about work. We work to live. We don't live to work. So I tried to always remember that, and to try to be not only good to the people that worked for me, but to give them opportunities that they may not have had otherwise wherever I could. So anyway, long story short, I did that for a few years there in Albuquerque. And then I had started dating someone who then became my second husband. And my kids at the time were struggling with their relationship with their father. My daughter was not yet a teenager. She was approaching her teen years, but wasn't yet there. And she was really struggling with the relationship she had with her father. And my son wasn't really struggling as much because he hadn't really ever had a relationship with his father. But there were some things that were starting to happen that were causing me distress as far as the kids were concerned, because I was very concerned about how it was all affecting them. So at that time, I had an opportunity to move with the company and move to New York State. Turned out to be the best thing we ever did. But at the same time, my son had learning disabilities. And in Albuquerque, the public schools weren't really strong. I couldn't afford to put him in private school, but it didn't matter. At some point when he was in kindergarten, I ended up realizing that there was no way that he was going to be able to get an education in the public school system there in Albuquerque. So I pulled him out of school, and even though I couldn't afford it, I had him in a private school that worked specifically with kids with learning disabilities. So we had started that, and it wasn't going well. He was doing the best he could, but it really wasn't going well. He was going into fourth grade and reading at a first grade level, and was really losing his joy for school and joy for learning, which was hard to watch. So the move to New York, the other good thing about it was I had a lot of family in New York, and I knew a lot about the New York school systems. That was one thing that was really strong in New York, were the public school systems. So that was also part of the impetus for the move. So I ended up deciding that that was the best thing for me and the kids, and we took off to move to New York. My then boyfriend ended up coming with me, and shortly after we moved, became my husband. And there was a particular incident that I just wanted to outline for everybody, because it just goes to show that, again, things can happen that are just inexplicable. There's no other way to explain some of the things that have happened in my life other than that there's a power greater than me, because there's no way in hell I could have done this on my own, nor could I have created this situation with purpose the way that it turned out. So the company, I had gone out and interviewed and did a house hunting trip and all these things, as they decided they wanted me to be a supervisor in their office. This was a lateral move for me, but they were paying for the move. So it was all expenses paid. And I went out and I found a home that was in this wonderful school district for me and the kids. And at the time, my eventual husband, he had decided that we were not going to be living together. He was just moving with us, and he was going to be working in the same office. And he he was going to have his own apartment. I was going to rent this house for me and the kids. So I put down my down payment for this home in July, and we moved in August. And as we were driving across the country, we were taking his stuff in a U-Haul truck, and we had my car, and my things, all of my belongings, were on a giant truck paid for by the company. So the moving truck was going to be there in, like, I don't know, 5 days, something like that. I don't recall exactly, but I think it was about 5 days. So we had to beat the truck there. So the kids and Tyler and I, we had this great time on our cross country drive to New York. And we get there, and we don't know anybody in this area of New York. My whole family's down on Long Island. However, we're moving to Syracuse, New York. We don't know anybody there. But I had found this great house in the perfect school district, and school starts in a week and a half after we get there. So I am literally driving up to the home that I had rented. And as I'm pulling up to the house, I'm so excited because this is a gorgeous home and it's a gorgeous area, and the kids are excited, and everybody's just, over the moon. I jump out of the car and we walk in the door, and the smell hits you in the face. And I went, "Oh my God, what is that?" And we start looking around the house, and it turns out there had been a pipe leak sometime between the time that I rented the house in July and when we move in August. A pipe had burst somewhere, and there's now mold literally throughout this entire home. There were wood floors in the house. It's a 2-story home, wooden floors, and there's a green patina across all of the floors throughout the entirety of the home. And I just went, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" So Tyler and I, we've just driven from, I think we did like Ohio to New York that day. So we were all tired, and we thought, well, what the hell are we going to do? So we're trying to figure out options. And we've got his U-Haul truck there with his belongings in it. So we pull out a rug that was wrapped up, and we yank it out of the truck, and we sit it down on the garage floor. And the kids had their bikes on his truck because we knew we needed their bikes with us. So they were out riding bikes and meeting all these kids in the neighborhood, and they're having a blast. This is on a cul-de-sac. So they're meeting the kids in the area. And he and I are sitting down, and he ran and got beer. Because, why not? So we're sitting there having a beer, and we're thinking to ourselves, what the hell are we going to do? I'm screwed. Like, this is not good. What are we going to do? So as we're sitting there and we're having our beer, up drives this vehicle with a woman in it that I've never seen before. Turns out she's a neighbor. She stopped to introduce herself. So she introduces herself, and she says, what's going on? How are you guys doing? And I just shared with her, well, we're not doing too well, actually. We just moved in. We should be moving in. I rented this house for me and the kids, and it's full of mold. And she was kind of taken aback, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that." She said, "What are you going to do? Do you have anywhere to go?" And I said, "No, I don't. I don't have anywhere to go." And unbelievably, she said, "I just so happen to have a rental a couple streets away. It's a 3-bedroom apartment. It's in the same school district. And if you want it, you can have it. You can move in immediately, and I'll charge you, $100 a month for rent. It'll just be a temporary arrangement until you can find your home." And I was completely floored. I thought, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. So she drove us over there. It was exactly what we needed. It was a tiny little apartment, but it was all we needed. It was 3 bedrooms. The kids each had their own room, and we had all of Tyler's stuff with us. So we were able to use his belongings to get through the next couple weeks. Because all I'm thinking about is the kids are about to start school, and all I have for them is the clothes on their back, a couple of suitcases, and their bicycles. That's it. What are we going to do? So we get it moved into this apartment. We're using Tyler's belongings to do it because my truck with all of my belongings has been lost. How does that happen? It's a moving truck, a giant moving truck. Corporate move. They had lost my truck. They had no idea where it was. It was somewhere in the country between New Mexico and New York. They had no idea where. They were trying to locate it, and they told me that I would be able to put in a claim for money to pay for my inconvenience. I wasn't too worried about my inconvenience. I was worried about all my shit because they had everything I own on this truck. But regardless, that's the situation we were in. So now we're in this small little apartment, this rental that with this realtor. Oh, that was the other thing. She ended up being a realtor as well. The neighbor who just popped by to introduce herself not only had an open apartment available that we could move into immediately, but she was also a realtor. Okay. So then she ends up showing us the house across the street from the house that I had rented that had all the mold in it. The house across the street went up for sale literally that weekend. So Tyler and I, though we were dating only 6 months, we looked at each other and said, we could buy the house. That would give the kids the home that they need in the school district that they need, and we could make that work. So we started thinking about how we could do this. Can we actually make it work? So we went and saw the mortgage broker to figure out whether or not we could actually financially make it work. I had sold my house in Albuquerque. He had sold his house in Albuquerque. So we had some finances available then, but we needed another $30,000. So while we were living in this little apartment, we had a piece of paper sitting up on the refrigerator with 30,000 at the top of it. And we were just hoping and praying for that $30,000 somehow, some way. We needed to come up with this money to be able to solidify this home. And I'll be damned, but money started coming in from anywhere and everywhere. Literally. Tyler sold a car that was back in Albuquerque. We had the utility companies were refunding money that we had put forth as deposits in Albuquerque. We just had money coming in from the oddest and strangest places. It was bizarre. And we got the $30,000 and we bought the house. Very shortly thereafter, we got married, and that was kind of another chapter. But the amazing part is that, again, just figuring out our putting forward and moving forward one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, even then we didn't know what we were going to do. We just had faith that it was going to work out. It was going to work out. There was no other option. It was going to work out. And it did. And the ways in which it did were bizarre. They're things that I could not have made up if I tried. I couldn't have come up with this neighbor who just so happened to have a 3-bedroom apartment, or the fact that the $30,000 that we needed to make this financial transaction happen just happened to flow in from all these different places. It was unbelievably bizarre, but it worked out. So then we end up at the house. We are kind of just going through the motions. We've got one thing after the other with the kids. And, Lexi was 12 when we moved there. Nick was almost 8. And it ended up being the best move it could have been for them scholastically. Lexi is a really strong student. She did really well in school, and it was great for her. Nick, though he was struggling because of his learning disabilities, the teachers in New York are of a different caliber, and they were paid differently. And his fourth grade teacher stayed after school every single day with him to teach him to read and would work with him one on one. And it didn't cost me anything, and other than my property taxes, which were outrageous, but I didn't mind paying them. But he learned to read. By the end of that year, he not only was reading at a fourth grade level, he was reading at a sixth grade level. So, and now he's an avid reader still to this day, but it was all due to that one teacher. So it ended up being just the best move, not only for us personally, but for my children. And I'm so thankful for that whole period. But it really was, to say it was stressful there at the beginning was an understatement. So anyway, that's kind of how that move happened. And in the meantime, I was working as a supervisor, and then ended up becoming, my branch manager had left the office, he moved, and that became a promotional opportunity for me. So I moved into a management role, and I became the branch claims manager at that office. And then a couple years after that, I became the state claims manager for that large insurance company. And unfortunately, during that entire period, I was letting my health come in last. I would work long hours, often late into the night, and get up first thing before dawn and get to the office. I was pretty much constantly stressed out. That if you've heard the phrase rushing woman syndrome, that's me. I was all about trying to get everything done for everyone all the time and constantly rushing. And my stress level was completely out of control. And I didn't really recognize what that was doing to my health at that point in time. Suffice it to say, it was disastrous. So that brings you up to kind of current, where all the stuff starts, where all the real health issues start. And we'll start getting into that in the next episode, because I feel like I had to set the stage for you to understand what it is that I'll take you through now that we're getting to the health part of my journey. And I thank you for putting up with the backstory. But I did feel like it was important that you know who I am and kind of some of the things that have gone on in my life, because that theme here about things just working out and ultimately having faith and allowing for a power greater than myself to be in charge, that takes a bigger role as we move forward. So I wanted that groundwork to be laid so that you understand when we move forward and we start talking about the health aspects of my journey and how they may apply, how you may be able to apply some of the things that I did to your own life and your own challenges. I wanted you to be able to understand where that's coming from. So that's it. So that brings us up to current, and we will start with the next episode speaking much more specifically about the health related challenges that I had, and then get into how I switched that around. So again, thanks for being here at Second Take. And remember, there is no one coming to save us, but we have everything we need to save ourselves. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.